Yeah, the official subject tonight is the status of drinking on Purim. I want to give a little background to put it in perspective. It's well known that the theme of Purim is revealing things that are otherwise hidden. The name of Hashem does not appear in the Megillah. Nevertheless, the Megillah describes what the tradition calls a miracle, which means that events that look natural, if you analyze them on a deeper level, can be seen to be miraculous. I think this it shows in the narrative of the Megillah. It starts with Achashverosh's celebration, which certainly looks just like a Middle Eastern bash, and then there's a political conflict with the queen, and she's deposed. These things happen in court intrigue. Esther is chosen as the successor. Well, it's a lottery. Whoever wins is 1,000 to 1 chance against. And that we don't say that when someone wins a lottery, that's a miracle. She manages to keep her background secret. In a Jewish group, that's really a miracle. But again, the external observer, okay, so it's a mystery where she comes from. There's a plot against the king, and Mordechai overhears the plotters and tells Esther about it, and she tells the king in Mordechai's name, and they investigate and find the plotters and have them killed, and the king's life is saved. Well, plots against king are common. And most of the plots fail, otherwise it would hardly pay to be king, because you'd have a very short life. It's certainly not miraculous that they discovered a plot and foiled it. The incident is written down in Achashverosh's Sefer HaZichronos, and don't confuse the book of memories or reminders with the Divrei Hayamim, which are the history books. They have two different titles. This is the book of things to do. But he forgets. Well, you would have expected that somebody saves your life. You like to encourage people like that, no? So you have more people who are interested in saving your life. But Mordechai was a Jew, and the Jews were a captive people and scattered people, they didn't have their own land or their own government, and they were despised. So a Jew was behind it, and it slipped his mind. None of this looks miraculous. Then Haman conceives a hatred for Mordechai and decides he wants to kill him. He's coming to the palace in the middle of the night to tell the king to kill Mordechai. And that night the king can't sleep. And the king says that his servant should bring the Sefer HaZichronos, as Chazal explained. This is the book that records debts to be paid, people to be taken care of in one way or another. And the king's thought was, maybe I haven't done something for somebody, and that's what's keeping me awake. And he asked him to read it. And of course, the scroll was open to precisely that point 4 years before, where Mordechai had informed on the plotters, and the plotters were discovered and killed, and the king is suddenly struck by a guilty thought. Mordechai informed me and saved my life. Was anything done to Mordechai to reward him for that? No, say there's nothing written here. No, the book is empty. Well, that's terrible. We really ought to do something to reward Mordechai. Who's in the courtyard? And who's in the courtyard but Haman coming to tell the king to kill Mordechai? Isn't that ironic? Got him! And so the king says to Haman, honor Mordechai because he saved my life. And Haman goes out, devastated. Now I think if you wrote this story and you tried to sell it to a reputable publisher, the editors would say, this incident can't be included in the story. It's just not believable. It's not believable. It's too coincidental. Things like that don't happen in the natural world. And the editor's right. They don't happen. That's what makes it a miracle. It is too coincidental. It's too convenient. It's too convenient because it isn't accidental. History isn't random. This is the place where divine providence shows. And just that night when Haman wants to kill Mordechai, and that night he can't sleep, and that night he takes out the book of reminders, and it's open just to the point which talks about Mordechai. And now he has a stricken conscience. What do we do for Mordechai? That's not the kind of thing that happens in our natural, everyday, accidental world, the way we see it. So the reader says, up to now it was believable, but at this point it becomes unbelievable, which is exactly right. Miracles are unbelievable. That is to say, those people who are addicted to seeing everything naturally, they can't read them. But now I think there's an extra dimension, and that is a thoughtful person living through these events and then seeing what happened to Mordechai versus Haman might reflect, how did this happen? Let's see, there were the plotters. Mordechai found out about it, and he told Esther. And Esther's the queen. And then Esther told the king. Wow. How did Esther get to be queen? Oh yeah, there was the celebration. And there was the fight with Vashti. And Vashti got deposed. And then the king, and then Esther's there, just there to tell the king that Mordechai told her about the plotters. And she wins the beauty contest. So maybe winning the beauty contest wasn't an accident of 1 in 1,000. And maybe the fight with Vashti to get her deposed wasn't an accident. Maybe the whole thing was a plan. Because you see, each one of these events was necessary to get to that point where Haman's coming in to kill Mordechai, and the king saves Mordechai because he suddenly recovers the information. They didn't reward him for saving his life. That, I think, is the crucial dimension in understanding the miracle of Purim, that the events that people lived through and classified as natural events, they re-evaluate, and they understand that what looked to them like meaningless, accidental history turned out to be divine providence. And that's the message of Purim. Not just that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes in the world, like for example, the plagues in Egypt, or the crossing of the sea, or the revelation at Sinai. But even when it doesn't look like he's intervening, he's intervening. He just covers his tracks, so to speak. He hides his face, but that doesn't mean he isn't there. It's like hiding your face when you put on a disguise. You've hidden your face. People don't recognize you, but you're there, and you're operating. That's the impression that one ought to get from Megillas Esther. And maybe that's why there's a custom among the Jewish people on Purim to dress up in costumes. Why is that gorilla knocking at my door? And he has a can. The can says, Yeshivat Eitz Chaim. It has a little slot at the top of the can. I wonder what that's for. That's where the money goes. Right? But why is the gorilla doing that? Well, it's your next door neighbor, Chaim. But he's dressed in a gorilla suit because it's Purim. Because on Purim, you should realize that there's an external veneer, and beneath that veneer is something else. I don't know how many of you know what kreplach are. Kreplach is a dish, it's a food, where you take a piece of meat and you enclose it in dough. So when you look at it, it looks like a piece of dough. Usually serve it in soup. And the idea is, this thing that looks like a piece of dough really is full of meat. But you don't see the meat. So again, you're dealing with something where there's an external appearance, and then internally, it's quite different, much richer than the external appearance would have you believe. This is a theme, some ask, we call it Megillas Esther, but there are 5 Megillos. Esther, and Shir HaShirim, and Eicha, and Koheles, and Rus. There are 5 Megillos. But when you speak of the Megillah, it's only Megillas Esther. Why? So the word Megillah can be related to rolling it up because it's a scroll. Of course, the other books of the Tanakh were also scrolls at that time. But we call those 5 of them Megillos, and it's related linguistically to rolling it up. But Megillah is also related to the word reveal. And the scroll that reveals something that's otherwise hidden is Megillas Esther. There are a lot of elements of this theme of revealing things that are hidden, which are tied up in the holiday of Purim. Where does the name Purim come from? It's a very, very strange word, because the Yud Mem ending is plural in Hebrew, and the word Pur is a Persian word, which means a lot, something that you cast to make a decision. So it's Pur, the Persian word, with a plural im ending, Purim. Why? And in the Megillah, when it says Pur, each time it says Hu HaGoral. I know this book is written for Hebrew readers, and it's written in the Hebrew language, and I'm using a Persian word, so you might not know what the Persian word means, so I'll tell you in Hebrew what the Persian word means. It means lot. So just write Goral. Why put in the Persian word and then translate it into Hebrew? What's the point of that? The point of that is that the Persians had a concept of what a lot is, what it represents, and what it accomplishes, and they were dead wrong about it. The lot has a hidden meaning, which the Torah reveals to us. And the Megillah is saying, you, Haman, used the lots to make your decision when to destroy the Jewish people, and you thought you were employing a certain type of agency, but you didn't know what you were doing. Turns out that the lot is really the Goral that the Torah describes. Now, casting lots to determine what to do, I guess to the naive person looks a little bit superstitious. If there really isn't any difference, then choose one arbitrarily. Why bother going through the procedure of casting lots? It says which way ever the lot goes, it's just a matter of chance. Why use that procedure? Does the Torah ever tell us to use lots in our service to Kodesh Baruch Hu? Yeah, it does, actually. On Yom Kippur, there are two goats, one of which is sacrificed inside and one which is pushed off the cliff to Azazel. And the Torah describes them as absolutely identical as two goats could be. And then you cast lots to determine which one should be sacrificed in the temple and which one should be pushed off the cliff. Two very different outcomes for two items that look very similar. In fact, the ideal is that you can't tell them apart. So what's the message? It doesn't matter? No, the message is that when you employ a procedure that you aren't in control of, you employ a procedure for which you cannot produce the outcome, because Baruch Hu produces the outcome and makes it fit his circumstances, his goals. And the proof of it is, there's one other occasion in which in Jewish history we used lots. When we came into the land of Israel, the land was divided up, one piece for each tribe. And the tribes had sent spies to the land of Israel to find a place that would be good. This is the Malbim's explanation. To find a place that would be good for that tribe. So it was clear that there were these various geographical positions, and they were for the sake of these and these tribes, depending upon what their preferences were. But it wasn't left at that. They made a procedure where they took the names of the tribes, and they took the names of the portions of the land, and they used a mixture and picked out one of each and matched them. That looks like a chance procedure. Every one of them matched the one that was pre-assigned to it, using this procedure of which you have no control. Here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals that through the lots, he's making things happen the way they should happen. And he's confirming for the people that the assignment of the particular geographical locations wasn't just a matter of possibly fallible human judgment, but divine providence also wants it that way. So Haman thinks he's either invoking the Persian deities or he's using the idea of chance to contradict any control. That's not what lots are. Lots are what the creator of the universe uses them for in terms of the outcome that he wants. So it's a Pur Hu HaGoral. So again, you have something which is viewed in a certain conception, and it turns out that the reality is very different. This is a theme that goes throughout the whole Purim literature and Purim celebration. This is fairly well known, what I've just told you. I want to apply this to the question of drinking. There's a Tikkuni Zohar that makes a very challenging statement. First of all, the 10th of Tishrei, the day of atonement in the Torah, is called Yom HaKippurim. Not Yom Kippur like we call it. The difference is Yom Kippur would be singular, never called singular. It's always HaKippurim, plural. Kippurim. Day of Atonement, literally. The Tikkun Zohar says, look, the words written in the Torah have no vowels. You just have a string of letters. That string of letters could be pronounced differently. It could be Yom Kippurim. Just add another dot under the kaf. So instead of a chirik, it becomes a shva. Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. Wow, that's what the Tikkun Zohar says. Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. I think it's a very challenging statement. I would imagine if I would ask you to meditate on the Jewish calendar and find 2 days that are polar opposites, it would be a good choice to say Purim and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, you're fasting all day, and you're in shul the whole day, and you're praying for your life, you're praying for your health and safety and livelihood, and you're making solemn resolutions to change the way you behave so that your life will be improved, and you're confessing your sins. And Purim isn't like that. Purim isn't like that at all. Day full of joy, and even some joking, and costumes, and, well, drinking, for some anyway, as we'll see. What link could there possibly be between Yom Kippur and Purim? And to push the question with a little more precision, when you say that A is like B, that's not the same as saying B is like A, and neither is the same as saying A and B are similar. A is like B means B has some characteristic, and A approximates what B has. B has it in a stronger, more complete form, and A approximates what B has. That's why A is like B is not the same as B is like A. And when you say A and B are similar, you mean to equate them, so that one doesn't have more than the other. They just share a common characteristic. So if you say that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, what you're saying is that Purim has some feature, and that feature is had by Purim in a more complete, more perfect way, and Yom Kippur approximates that. Boy, oh boy. Going to make, in some respect, Yom Kippur second class to Purim? That's really quite shocking. What could the Zohar have in mind? Here is an explanation. The goal of a Jewish life, 363 days per year, is that the normal tension between body and soul should lead the body to impose, lead the soul to impose its will on the body, so the body will follow the dictates of the soul. There's tension, there's competition, there's difficulty, and the goal is that the soul should lead the body in the direction in which the person should go. That's the goal. 363 days a year. 2 days a year don't have that two-dimensionality. 2 days of the year are one-dimensional days. They're soul days. One is Yom Kippur, one is Purim. Let's see how each one works. In Yom Kippur, the body is pushed to the back row. No eating, no drinking, no bathing, no anointing in oil, no leather shoes, and no family relations. What's the message? The message is that the body is in competition with the soul, that the body is something which can dilute the functioning of the soul, so get rid of it! Build a wall against it. No eating, no drinking, none of those activities. The whole day is crafted around soul activities, because that's what the day should be dedicated to. And it's accomplished by simply turning the body off. So it's a one-dimensional day by ignoring the other dimension, by pressing out of action the other dimension, the soul day. Now what happens on Purim? Well, this is what ought to happen. Let's suppose you observe a tzaddik, a real tzaddik. You observe him and you see that everything he does is right and good. Everything, with no exceptions. There's an ambiguity because there are two types of tzaddikim. One type of tzaddik is one who does what I said 90 seconds ago. He imposes the strength of his will and his soul on the body, and he directs the body. And the body is manipulated by the soul's direction. And therefore, it does everything right. But there's another possibility. And that is that through training the body to follow the direction of the soul, the body little by little loses its competitive nature. It loses its contrast with the soul. Little by little, the body also becomes spiritualized, elevated, sanctified. And this can reach a limit where the body no longer poses any opposition to the soul at all. And then there's no struggle. Then it's something which flows automatically. If you want a source for this, I'm speaking now to your prejudices, you can look in the Meshech Chochmah, in his introduction to the Sefer Shmos, where he describes Moshe Rabbeinu as having achieved this, based on a Rambam. And if you aren't hopelessly prejudiced against the Hasidic world, which I represent, you could look in the Tanya, where the Tanya distinguishes the three positions, Tzaddik, Beinoni, and Rasha, in a very unique way. For him, for the Tanya, Tzaddik is someone whose body has been brought in harmony with his soul, and he has no evil inclination, and he does everything right without effort, without struggle, without opposition. The Beinoni, which you could naively translate as an intermediary state, is someone who always does everything right, which is quite a unique definition. He always does everything right with struggle. He has an active Yetzer Hara, and he's fighting all the time, but he wins all the battles. And a Rasha, a wicked person, is a person who sometimes loses the battles and does things that are wrong. So again, this is not the typical definition of these terms, but here you have the same concept. The tzaddik, for the Baal HaTanya, is someone who is no longer fighting any battles because he's reached that position where there's no opposition. Now you are an observer, you're observing this person, and you're wondering, I see that everything he does is right, but what kind of person is he? Is he the Baal HaTanya's tzaddik, or the Baal HaTanya's Beinoni? How could you find out? Well, here's one way you could find out. If he gets drunk, then his conscious soul control and direction of the body is going to be weakened or blotted out. And then the body's going to function on its own. And then you'll see what the body wants. You'll see what he does when he's drunk. And you'll see that all he does is express love of Torah and love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, love of the Jewish people, and he's singing and dancing in joy and so forth and so on. And this is now the body expressing itself. Then you get a vision of a body that's been elevated to the point where it too is spiritualized and sanctified. That's what drinking could do if such a person drinks. He could reveal that to you. Okay, now, let's pick up the threads. We were supposed to see that both Yom Kippur and Purim are one-dimensional days, but the one-dimensionality of Purim is more thorough, more perfect, more fundamental than that of Yom Kippur. The one-dimensionality of Yom Kippur was achieved by putting the body on the side, which means, conceptually, the body and the soul are still opposed to one another. That's why you have to put the body aside, because it will interfere. It will dilute what the soul is doing. So you got to turn it off. But now when this tzaddik on Purim gets drunk, and you get a glimpse into the spirituality of his body, you learn something much deeper. You learn that body and soul, in essence, at the end of the day, aren't two opposed elements. They aren't two elements in conflict with one another. because the foundation of which the body is built is also holy. It's also spiritual. It just takes a certain amount of development to get there. So, again, on Yom Kippur you have two opposed elements, one of which is turned off. But they remain opposed. Your picture of the world is two-dimensional, just that, under these conditions, only one dimension is functioning. On Purim, you get a glimpse of the idea that there's really only one dimension. That's much deeper. That's much more fundamental. And this is, again, an element in the picture of revealing things that are hidden. In the case of this person whose active life is a tzaddik, it's hidden whether he's still fighting with his body, which is opposing him, or whether he's conquered the body, and the body's on his side, and he's one-dimensional, and all of him is holy. You don't see that. So again, getting drunk is a way of revealing that. And here's the bitter lesson, in case it isn't obvious. That's a person who should get drunk. If getting drunk will reveal the holiness in his soul, in his body, the spirituality of the body, that's something that's a precious thing to be able to observe. It's revealing something that's hidden in the deepest possible way, which reveals something that's hidden about the entire creation. We're monotheists. Monotheism isn't just, there are not lots, there's just one, but it means everything is traced to the one creator, which means all of the diverse elements of the world, Rabbi talks about this in the Das Tunos, all the diverse elements of the world trace themselves to one source. Well, it doesn't look that way. The diversity of the elements in the world and the events that take place in the world would naturally be interpreted as the activity of many different powers, not one power. The Torah tells us, yes, that's the way it would naturally look. Don't look with those eyes. Those eyes are misleading. So when you see that the body, whose opposition to the soul gives rise to free will and enables us to make our own choices, that in a certain sense is temporary and superficial, because the body too comes from a root which is all holy, and a person can arrive at that position in life where the body expresses that holiness, and that being the case, there's harmony between body and soul, and that's the highest achievement that a human being can achieve. That's revealing something about this person's body, revealing something about human capabilities, revealing something about the ultimate perfection of the creation as a whole. This is a very, very deep revelation. And I should tell you, in the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, who writes for the Sephardi world, quotes the Gemara word for word. You should drink until you don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Or Haman. But the Ramah, writing for the Ashkenazi world, writes that you should have a little more than you normally drink and have a nap. And while you're asleep, you won't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Or Haman. And I really can't justify the vast number of Ashkenazim who on Purim become Sephardim for a day. Today, we're very ecumenical, and it's all brotherhood. And from time to time, we like to, show recognition of the other one's culture, and therefore, on Purim, I hold like a Sephardi and I get drunk. There are other days which I could recommend if you want to be ecumenical. How about in Purim, in Elul, where they say slichos for a whole month, not for a mere week or 10 days. That's a good time to be an honorary Sephardi. Go right ahead. Get up early for a whole month. I don't hear many volunteers for that. The Ashkenazi world is divided. There are groups who do drink. I can't say anything. That's their custom. It's their custom in this case to follow the Mechaber. They follow the Mechaber, or the Gro, whoever. But many in the Ashkenazi world follow the Ramah. My Rabbi Zatzal said, you're not supposed to get drunk, period. Do what the Ramah says, and that's it. And so do many Hasidic groups, the same thing. And I, following my Rabbi Zatzal, and following my own understanding, I find it very difficult to applaud and to encourage people to get drunk who are only going to show either animalistic or bad midos or destructive behavior. I can't see it. I cannot see that is a way of honoring God's name on Purim. Again, there are people who disagree with me, and they're wonderful people. I'm telling you the way I see it. Never been explained to me or seen that this is an appropriate thing to do. When it will reveal the holiness, I think maybe I did see one or two times in my lifetime some Rosh Yeshiva who was drunk and who was talking about, drunkenness sometimes wipes out inhibitions. And there are certain things that people feel about Torah and feel about other Jews which a normally reserved personality wouldn't express. To see such a person hugging and kissing his Talmidim, telling them how much he loves them, which he doesn't do any other day of the year, is very beautiful. There's no question. It's very beautiful. I know of one person. He had several small children, and he lived in an apartment where nearby there was a wall, and it was a 2-story drop to the pavement below. And in his drunkenness, he put one of his children on his shoulders and climbed up on the wall and danced on the wall. He didn't know what he was doing. Later, when he found out what he was doing, he swore he would never do something like that again. That's not the drunkenness that I believe that Kosh Baruch Hu wants on Purim, where you just do something irresponsible and dangerous because you're so happy. It has to. No, I'll tell you one other thing. Rav Hutner, in one of his Ma'amorim on Purim, he says something very, very fascinating. Another element that you find, what happened when Mordechai tells Esther to go into the king? Esther says he's in his inner sanctum, where the law is anybody who knocks on the door dies, unless the king wants to show him mercy. And I haven't been called there in 30 days. And the subtext is, and the decree is signed for 11 months from now. That's a long time. Surely there'll be a better time for me to go into the king and ask for mercy than interrupting him and possibly crossing the law and all the rest. So, so Mordechai says to her that you have to go in, and if you don't go in, you and your house could be destroyed, and the Jews will be saved some other way. Because he saw the reaction of the Jews when the announcement was made. He put on sackcloth and ashes. They put on sackcloth and ashes. He was wailing in the streets. They were wailing. He saw the reaction right away. So he knew that there'd be salvation. But he said, you became queen. This is your opportunity to use your influence as queen to save the Jewish people. I was going for a different point. So, Esther says, you should fast for me for 3 days and 3 nights, and I'll go into the king. Okay, this conversation is taking place on the 13th of Nisan. Now, 3 days and nights is going to be the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And as I said on another occasion, that means not eating matzah, and not eating matzah means not doing the mitzvah. It was all back and forth, and Mordechai did what Esther wanted him to do, what she commanded him to do. But there's a difference in opinion in the commentaries. When was she goes in, so what happens? She goes in once, and the king says, what do you want? She says, I want you to come to a feast with me today, you and Haman. They go, and the king says at the feast, what do you want? Because she didn't want him just to come to a drinking party. And she says, I want Haman to come tomorrow with the king, and tomorrow I will do the king's bidding. She's hinting to him, I'll finally tell you who I am, what my people is, and so forth and so on. And in the second feast, that's when she says, I'm a Jew, and this Haman has made a decree, and I'm going to die, and all my people are going to die. And the king is persuaded to save the Jewish people. So now, you have the 14th, 15th, and 16th are the days of the fast. And there are 2 feasts. One where she says, come tomorrow, and then there's a tomorrow where they come together and she reveals herself and she gets the Jews to be saved. There's machlokes in the Meforshim when these two feasts are. One shot is you have the first day of the feast, the fast is the 14th. The 15th is when she goes in to the king the first time and has the first feast. And the 16th, which is the third day of the fasting, the height of the fast, that's when she says to the king, please save the Jewish people. Well, I think we understand that very well. This is a time when the whole of Shushan is fasting. It's the height of their doing tshuva, and that's the moment when she asks for the Jews to be saved. It makes perfect sense. But the other shot is that the first fast is on the 16th. The first feast, when she first goes into the king, is on the 16th. That's the third day of the fast. Then she says, I want Haman and the king to come tomorrow on the 17th. The 17th. When the fast is over. The Jews are eating pizza, lasagna, and challah. It's over. They're having a feast. And then she goes in and asks for mercy for the Jewish people. Why would that be? Why would that be? Why would she time it that way? And the answer that's given is this. The real test is getting in. That's the real test. Everything else is anticlimax. Everything else is consequences. He's sitting there on the golden throne. Gold is a symbol of strict judgment, strict justice. And he has a scepter. We have actually in the pictures from the time. He's sitting on a throne. The scepter goes from the floor above his head, a long rod of gold. Strict justice. There's a decree against the Jewish people in heaven. Strict justice. She's going to go in where the law is die. Die. Strict justice. If she knows, when the door opens and he sees her, he leans the golden scepter to her and she touches the end of it. And that's the way in which it's expressed that she's accepted. She knows the struggle's over. It's over. Even the attribute of strict justice has given up on destroying them. Tomorrow is an afterthought. It's an anticlimax. It's taken for granted. Once that's done, it's over. That's what happens on the 16th. The first time going is done on the 16th. 17th, after that, everybody's finished. Yeah. That's when she makes the accusation. And by the way, if you look at the text there is absolutely exquisite. The text says, she says that Haman wants to kill her and the whole Jewish people and everything else, so they get rid of Haman, right? And she starts rolling on the floor and wailing and screaming and crying. So, what is it? She gets up and she gives a speech. And if you look at the words in the speech and the poetry in the speech, well crafted, and she's not out of control, and she's not sobbing in shock and so forth and so on. This is all planned. And she says, how can I possibly live a life if I'm in the palace and I'm protected and my people, the Jewish people, is going to be destroyed? You have to take it back. That's all an afterthought. So here again is something which most readers, I think, don't catch. If you have this chronology of it, this forces you to see that there's something here that doesn't meet the eye. I don't remember the other point that I wanted to make. I'm going to finish with one more observation. We come to the end of the Megillah. Baruch Hashem. Wow. The Jewish people are saved. And Esther is queen and Mordechai is prime minister. And the king is on record that he killed Haman because he raised his hand against the Jews, which of course isn't true. That's his spin, but that's his public spin. So I think that people are going to think 3 times before they lift their hands against Jews. Things are wonderful, and we're all celebrating. Except for one thing. What about Esther? She remains queen to this Oriental schlub. It's really very difficult, no? I mean, What kind of life does she have? Now she gives birth to a son. So there's a midrash that my Rabbi showed me now, I wasn't aware of, which quotes the Gemara, which says, according to one position, she was married to Mordechai. Well, she is married to Mordechai. She goes to the king because otherwise she'd be dead. And according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it's permissible. It's permissible as long as otherwise she'd be dead. But she was still married to Mordechai. So the Gemara says she would go to Achashverosh when she had to, and then she would go to mikveh and go back to Mordechai. Now, the question is raised, I forget which of the Mephoshim raises this question, it's a technical question. We have a rule, let's say a woman's husband dies, she shouldn't get married for 90 days, because if she turns out to be pregnant, we won't know who the father is. So how did she go from Achashverosh to Mordechai? Why wasn't there a 90-day waiting period in between? And that before he says, we have means, they even had means of preventing conception, and she used them when she was together with Achashverosh. Fine. Eventually she gives birth to a son. So according to this pshat, that son is Mordechai's son. In either case, he's Esther's son, which means he's a Jewish man. He doesn't live like a Jew. He eventually becomes king. He's a Persian king. When we dress up our daughters and granddaughters as Esther, would we really wish on them a life like Esther? No parent would dream of wishing that his grandchild should be like Esther. Live together with a Goyish king and have a son who's Jewish and he doesn't feel he's Jewish. This is a life for a Beis Yaakov girl? It's terrible. How do you understand that? How do you put that together with the Megillah? We're all so happy at the end of the Megillah. What about Esther? So I asked this question for many years with many different people. The only answer that I got from one of my sons-in-law, where he said, like the Gemara says, her name is Esther, referring to Hester Panim, when God hides his face. Her goral, her position in life is to live with Hester Panim. To the end. To the end. Not just halfway and they get freed from it and then, make parties for bris milah, make parties for upsharon and all the rest. No, she's living with Hester Panim to the end. I think that's it's a little bit shocking. It's a little bit bracing when you think of that. That's what she had to continue with. Yes, and I'll add one more footnote. I know I said one more before, but I'm adding one more. It says, the very last verse says that Mordechai was Ratzui l'rov echav. He was appreciated by and approved of by the majority of his brothers, comrades, colleagues. So there are Mephoshim who say the majority, the Gemara says, the majority, but a minority opposed him. Because they said, what are you doing, prime minister? You remember the Sanhedrin. You have no business being prime minister. And they take that as a critique of Mordechai. Okay, there's a lot of Torah, and there are a lot of commentaries, and they have a lot of things to say. I just want to share with you what the Maharal says. The Maharal says that we paskin according to the Rov. We make our decisions according to the majority, not the minority. And the majority did approve of what Mordechai was doing. So therefore, what Mordechai was doing was right, not wrong. Don't be overwhelmed by the minority who opposed him. There was danger to the Jewish people, continuing danger, and Mordechai being prime minister and Esther being queen was our protection against it. What he did was correct. At any rate, follow your customs, follow the laws that your Torah teachers tell you to do, and at least have in mind that if you do drink, the drinking should expose that of you which is really high, that of you which is really holy, that of you which has really achieved a high spirituality, and in that way you can reveal the successes you've had in elevating the physical side of your character. Purim Sameach.